In the dead silence of the night, when the lake is frozen under a heavy storm, something stirs just beyond the window. Imagine waking up in your cozy lake house, only to see a lone figure out on the ice, waving, screaming for help, begging you to come closer. But when you do, the smile that spreads across their face tells you it was never about a missing child. It was about you. Now picture this. You return to your childhood lake house years later, only to discover someone has been living above you, in the attic, waiting, watching, stabbing the family dog to keep you from noticing. Or maybe you're partying by the water when a light begins flashing across the lake. SOS. Someone's in trouble, right? But when you investigate, you find nothing but an empty house, stripped bare, and then footsteps rushing towards you from the shadows. This is not a vacation. This is a trap. Welcome to The Price Paid, where true horror hides in plain sight. Subscribe now before you step into a lake house and realize too late that someone has already been waiting for you. The first time I saw the place, it felt like a sanctuary. The snow was falling in slow, hypnotic sheets, covering everything in a blanket of white silence. After months of turmoil from my divorce, all I wanted was peace, a reset button, a space where the noise of my personal life could not follow me. Christina, my girlfriend at the time, had suggested a trip somewhere quiet, somewhere isolated. She wanted us to disappear into nature for a while, and I didn't need much convincing. When I saw the listing for a lake house in upstate New York, it seemed perfect. A modern yet rustic home sitting directly on the edge of a frozen lake, surrounded by woods and emptiness. The kind of setting where you feel cut off from the rest of the world. That was exactly what I thought I needed. When we arrived, there was something waiting for us on the front step, a small package, wrapped plainly, with no return address. On top was a handwritten note that read, "Enjoy your stay. Make sure to stay warm." Christina laughed, making a joke about quirky locals, but I remember the way her voice wavered as she did. Inside the package was nothing but a small box of matches. It struck me as odd, even unsettling, but we brushed it off. People leave welcome gifts in strange forms, I told myself. At the time, it felt harmless. For 2 days, we lived the winter dream. Long hikes through the snowy woods, steaming mugs of hot chocolate by the fireplace, and nights spent under a ceiling skylight watching the snow drift across the stars. The house was cozy, and the isolation was a blessing. But the storm outside grew worse each night, the snow piling deeper, the winds harsher. By the third night, the blizzard had swallowed the lake entirely. Sometime after midnight, I woke to a sound. At first, I thought it was just the storm outside, but then I realized there was something different, something unnatural. It wasn't wind, it wasn't snow, it was mechanical, deliberate. I pulled myself from bed without waking Christina and pressed my face to the window. Through the curtain of white, I saw a snowmobile creeping across the frozen lake. At first, I thought little of it. People ride snowmobiles across frozen lakes all the time. But this was different. It was past midnight, the storm was thick, and the riders seemed unsure, stopping and starting like they were testing the ice. I kept watching, transfixed. And then the figure climbed off, turned toward our house, and began waving frantically. I woke Christina and told her someone was out there. We both leaned into the glass, straining to hear the faint cries. A woman's voice, desperate, hysterical. "Help me! I lost my little boy in the snowstorm." The words hit me like a knife. A child out there in this storm? I didn't think twice. I pulled on my boots, told Christina to lock the door, and stepped out into the freezing night.
Did you hear that?
My breath turned to ice instantly. The snow stinging my face as I trudged toward the figure. She stood bundled in a fur coat, her hair braided tightly back, tears frozen to her cheeks. She repeated the story her boy had run from home, lost somewhere in the storm. But then she asked me something that froze my blood solid. With a smile curling at the edge of her lips, she asked, "Do you still have those matches?" For a second, I couldn't comprehend what she meant. Then my mind snapped back to the package on the doorstep, the box of matches. The realization hit me like a punch. She had left it. Not the host, not some friendly neighbor. She knew we were here. Before I could react, she pulled a gun from her coat and aimed it directly at me. My heart plummeted. She demanded my wallet and my phone, her voice calm now, steady. I obeyed. What else could I do? In less than 30 seconds, the illusion of safety was shattered. She pocketed what she wanted, climbed back onto the snowmobile, and vanished into the storm. I ran back across the ice, screaming to Christina to call the police. She was already on the phone by the time I reached the house, her face pale, her hands shaking. We locked the doors and waited, staring out the window, half expecting that snowmobile to reappear. But when the police finally arrived, there was nothing. The snow had erased her tracks. The officers did find an old boat ramp across the lake, their best guess for how she had gotten there. But no sign of her, no snowmobile, no boy, nothing. They told me what I already knew. There wasn't much they could do. The host refunded our trip and insisted he had nothing to do with the package. He sounded genuine, but the thought gnawed at me. How else could she have known we'd be there? Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was something darker. Christina wanted to move on, but I couldn't. The box of matches haunted me. Sometimes I wonder if it wasn't just about money. Maybe the robbery was a cover. Maybe she enjoyed the fear, the way my blood turned to ice when I realized she had been watching us all along. Maybe the matches were more than just a taunt, they were a message. A promise that someone, somewhere, knew exactly where we were. And that thought has never left me. The lake house in Northern California was always more than just a building to me. It was the place that marked my childhood, a little retreat where my sister and I could escape the routines of school and city life. The house sat tall with 2 stories and an attic perched above. The kind of attic children imagine is full of mystery and magic. When we were small, my sister and I would drag our sleeping bags up the narrow ladder and camp beneath the slanted roof. We brought our puppy with us, pretending we were on adventures, watching the lake through the single dusty window. It was a place where everything felt safe, untouched. But life has a way of changing the things you love most. As we grew older, college and work pulled our family apart, and summers at the lake became less frequent. When my grandparents passed away, the house grew heavier with meaning. Their furniture filled the rooms, the attic stuffed with keepsakes my parents could not bear to discard. Each visit felt bittersweet, as though ghosts of our childhood and of my grandparents lingered among the boxes. Eventually, my parents made a decision. They met an elderly veteran who worked as an antique restorer. He was a strange man, disfigured, his beard unkempt, his voice rough and unsettling. My father, who had served himself, bonded with him instantly, talking about sacrifice and duty. My mother and sister were less certain, and I shared their unease. Still, my parents signed a lease, allowing him to live in the lake house year-round. At first, it seemed harmless. The man was quiet, kept to himself, and the landscapers who maintained the property occasionally checked on him. But over time, rumors spread. Workers whispered that they had seen him sitting for hours on the porch, watching children play by the water. They spoke of other things too disturbing for me to even repeat that, convinced my mother we had made a grave mistake. She begged my father to end the lease. She screamed that it was irresponsible to let a stranger, especially one so unsettling, have free run of a house tied to our family's history. My father resisted. His respect for the man's military service blinded him, convinced him to show mercy where none was deserved. When the lease finally ended, my father told the man the house needed repairs and that he would have to leave. Surprisingly, the man did not fight. He packed up his belongings with help from the landscapers and disappeared from our lives. My father reassured us he would be fine, that it was no big loss. My mother, though, was relieved, eager to have him gone. Nearly a year later, after my sister graduated college, we decided to return to the lake house for the summer. It was supposed to be a celebration, a chance to reconnect. My parents had adopted a black lab named Bear, and my sister was thrilled to finally meet him. We arrived as the sun was setting, leaving Bear in the house while we went into town for dinner. When we returned, the first sign that something was wrong was Bear himself. He lay sprawled at the bottom of the stairs, panting heavily, blood smearing the floor beneath him. My sister screamed. My mother reached for her phone, and my father moved silently into the kitchen. He returned with a knife in his hand, his face pale but determined. I followed him as we crept upstairs. The silence was suffocating, broken only by Bear's labored breaths. My father stopped suddenly, staring upward. It took me a moment to see what he had noticed, the attic hatch, slightly ajar. A faint glow spilled out, the unmistakable beam of a flashlight. My body froze. Terror rooted me in place. My father did not hesitate. He yanked the hatch and climbed the ladder with reckless resolve. I stayed behind, paralyzed, listening for the sounds of a struggle that never came. After a moment, my father descended, his face a mask of conflict. He whispered that it was him, the old tenant. My mother's reaction was instant and violent. She stormed up the stairs, her screams echoing through the house. She had called the police already, unwilling to let this end quietly. My father wanted to show leniency, to let the man go, but there was no escaping now. The police arrived, climbing into the attic and pulling the man down. He looked fragile, sickly, but in his possession was a copy of our house key. My mother's fury burned hot when she realized my father had never changed the locks as he promised. The police carried him out, my father silent, my mother weeping with anger. Bear survived, though scarred by the attack. But the deeper wound was within my family. My father refused to press charges. He claimed the man had suffered enough, that he deserved pity rather than punishment. My mother disagreed, their arguments reaching a breaking point that nearly tore them apart. My sister and I watched, confused, hurt, unable to understand why sympathy was extended to a man who had invaded our sanctuary, hurt our dog, and stolen the safety of our childhood home. We never went back after that. The lake house, once a symbol of family and innocence, became a place tainted by intrusion and betrayal. The attic, where we had camped as children, was no longer a safe haven, but a reminder of how easily safety could be shattered. Sometimes I wonder if my father knew something more, if his refusal to condemn the man came from guilt rather than compassion. But the truth is, I will never know. All I know is that the house feels haunted now, not by ghosts, but by the choices that broke our family's trust. It was supposed to be nothing more than a quiet night by the water. I was 20 years old, still raw from the end of a 3-year relationship, and in desperate need of escape. My friend James had the perfect solution. His family was absurdly wealthy, the kind of wealth where vacation homes were scattered across the country like chess pieces. One of those homes sat on a secluded lake, a wide body of water rimmed by oversized houses that stood mostly dark and empty for much of the year. To James, it was just another playground. To me, it felt like a world away from everything I wanted to forget. That night, the two of us sat on the dock, a couple of beers in hand, letting the water reflect the dying light of day. The stillness was almost hypnotic. It was James who first noticed the flashing. A light across the lake, faint but insistent. At first, I thought it was a trick of the sunset, a glare bouncing off glass, but the pattern was too deliberate. On, off, on, off. 3 short bursts, 3 long ones, 3 short again. James snapped his fingers, excitement in his voice. That's SOS. I laughed, called him crazy, but he was right. I even checked my phone. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. A universal cry for help. We stared at the light, unease spreading like frost in our veins. It stopped as abruptly as it had begun, leaving only the dark outline of the house it had come from. James wanted to call the cops, but we were underage, drinking, and I already had a DUI on my record. I couldn't risk another run-in with the police. We argued, but in the end, our reckless curiosity won out. We decided to investigate ourselves. It felt like the kind of adventure we'd brag about later, something that would make the night memorable. We dragged his father's kayak into the lake, paddling toward the dark silhouette on the opposite shore. At first we laughed, adrenaline disguising the fear. But as the water swallowed us in silence, our voices faded. The lake seemed endless, the distance greater than it looked from the dock. The deeper we went, the colder the air grew, the more my chest tightened. When we finally reached the other side, unease turned to dread. The house was huge, but decrepit. Its dock half collapsed into the water. No lights, no movement. The yard was overgrown, the structure sagging under years of neglect. The perfect stage for something terrible. We couldn't tie the kayak to the dock, so we beached it in the yard, trying not to slip on the wet rocks. We crept around the house, avoiding the front door. There was no sound but our own breathing. No light but the faint glow of stars through the clouds. We found a window unlocked and slid inside. The air was stale, thick with dust, as though the house had been sealed for years. The rooms were empty. No furniture, no belongings, not even scraps of paper or forgotten trinkets. It was stripped bare, unnervingly clean, as if no one had ever lived there at all. We moved carefully, searching for stairs. The house groaned beneath us, but the silence was worse than any creak. When we found the second floor, my chest tightened. The window that had flashed the SOS was up here. We followed the hallway to the room, my pulse hammering with every step. At the door, I pressed my ear to the wood. Silence. James nodded, so I pushed it open. The room was empty. Empty except for a single object facing the window. An old projector. My stomach sank. Someone had set this up deliberately. Someone had baited us here. Before I could process it, James bolted. His footsteps thundered down the stairs, no attempt at stealth. Instinct screamed at me to follow. As I turned, I heard the unmistakable sound of a door slamming open upstairs, followed by rapid footsteps. They were not ours. I didn't look back. I sprinted after James, crashing down the stairs, shoving through the house. We leapt out the same window we had entered, landing hard in the dirt. My lungs burned, my legs heavy with panic. As we ran toward the shore, James cursed, and I saw why. The kayak was gone. From the side of the house, a figure emerged, tall, fast, and unmistakably adult. The sight of him blurred in the dark, but reignited a primal terror in me. I yanked the switchblade from my pocket, my hand shaking. James didn't even try. He dove into the water fully clothed, his sneakers and hoodie dragging him down. Without thinking, I followed. The lake was freezing, the cold slicing into my muscles, stealing my breath. We swam toward the faint lights of James's house, each stroke fueled by nothing but fear. The shore seemed miles away, the darkness endless, but adrenaline carried us. My chest burned, my body screamed, but somehow, impossibly, we reached the dock. We dragged ourselves onto the wood, coughing, shaking uncontrollably. Inside the house, we locked every door, every window, our wet clothes clinging to our skin. We called the police, begging them to come quickly. It took nearly an hour. By the time they arrived, we were still shivering, still glancing at the lake as though that figure might come running across the water. The police crossed to the other side and searched, but when they returned, their faces were grim. The house had been abandoned for years. No furniture, no footprints, no belongings, nothing. We tried to explain, but they dismissed us, lecturing us on the stupidity of investigating instead of calling. James's parents were furious when they found out, threatening lawsuits, demanding answers that would never come. I was never invited back after that night. And yet, the memory doesn't fade. I can still see the figure running from the side of that house, still hear the thudding footsteps behind me as I sprinted for the window. People tell me it was a prank, a cruel trick. Others believe it was a trap that never played out, that whoever was waiting for us decided at the last minute not to finish what they started. But I know what I felt. The fear was too real, the setup too precise. The SOS, the projector, the missing kayak. Someone wanted us there, someone wanted us vulnerable. And when I think about how close they came to having us, I can still feel the water closing over my head, freezing, endless, swallowing me whole. There is something about lake houses that draws people in. The glass windows reflecting the still water, the illusion of peace far from the noise of towns and cities, the promise of solitude wrapped in beauty. But as these stories show, behind that perfect postcard image lurks something much darker. A lake house is not just a retreat, it is an isolated stage where anything can happen, where the calm of nature can be shattered in an instant by the intrusion of something sinister. Think about it. The man in New York thought he was escaping his broken marriage, chasing quiet nights and clean air. Instead, he stepped into a carefully laid trap. A package on the doorstep that seemed innocent. A stranger out on the frozen lake calling for help. It could have been any one of us, who would not run outside if they thought a child was lost in the snow. But the truth was far more chilling. The woman knew he was there. She had been watching all along. And the matches were not a gift. They were a signal, a promise, a cruel message that safety was an illusion. Then there was the California lake house, once filled with childhood laughter. The attic where siblings camped became the hiding place for something malignant. The disfigured veteran may have seemed harmless at first, even sympathetic, but isolation amplifies danger. With no neighbors, no watchful eyes, he could linger unnoticed. When the family returned, they discovered that he had never truly left. He was above them in the attic, waiting. He attacked the dog, the one creature that sensed the intrusion before anyone else. And though he was caught, the damage was done. The family could never see their sanctuary the same way again. A place tied to the innocence of their youth was twisted into something they would never visit again. And the final story, perhaps the most haunting of all. A cry for help, Morse code flashing across the dark lake. It is the oldest trick in the book, prey luring the hunter. The two friends thought they were being brave, or maybe reckless, but curiosity led them into a house that was never a home. Stripped bare, furnished only with a projector aimed at the window. It was a stage designed for them, a trap that closed the moment they stepped inside. And when they ran, they were chased not by shadows, not by their imaginations, but by something real. A figure fast enough to terrify them, close enough to almost catch them. The kayak was gone, leaving them stranded. Their only hope was the freezing water. They made it, but only just. The police found nothing. But how could nothing feel so deliberate? These are not just stories of fear. They are reminders of how fragile our sense of safety truly is. In a city, we tell ourselves the noise protects us. Neighbors, lights, traffic. They create a shield,
You have to
however
listen to me
thin.
now.
But in a lake
coming
house,
for us.
surrounded by silence, who would hear you if you screamed? There are no strangers passing by, no witnesses. It is just you, the woods, the water, and whatever else chooses to find you. Each of these stories shares the same truth. The danger did not come from ghosts or myths, but from people. A woman with a gun, a man in an attic, a figure setting a trap with a flashing light. Humans are far more terrifying than the supernatural because they do not need to follow rules. They do not fade when the sun rises. They can plan, they can wait, they can smile as they pull you into their schemes. What is most disturbing is that none of these stories truly ended. The woman on the snowmobile was never caught. The tenant in the attic was let go without punishment. The figure by the lake house vanished without a trace. There is no resolution, no comfort, just unanswered questions and the lingering knowledge that these people are still out there, somewhere, maybe waiting for their next lake house to target. It makes you wonder how many lake houses stand empty for most of the year. How many are locked up, dark and silent, surrounded by water and trees? How easy would it be for someone to slip inside, unnoticed, and wait? A forgotten attic, a hidden basement, a window left unlocked. The places we retreat to for peace may be the most vulnerable of all. The most chilling detail across all three tales is how carefully the traps were set. The package with matches, the quiet veteran who built trust before showing his true side, the SOS light designed to play on empathy. None of it was random. It was manipulation, psychological warfare before the physical danger even began. The victims were pulled in by their own humanity, their desire to help, their loyalty, their curiosity. The predators counted on that. When you think about these stories together, a terrifying picture emerges. Lake houses are not haunted by spirits, but by possibilities. They are isolated boxes surrounded by silence, easy to romanticize, but easier to invade. And when you are alone by the water, the line between safety and danger is paper thin. So the next time you dream of booking a peaceful retreat on the lake, remember these stories. Remember the box of matches left by an unseen hand. Remember the attic hatch cracked open when you thought you were alone. Remember the flashing light that beckoned two friends across the water. Because the truth is, a lake house may not be your escape. It may be your cage. And someone, somewhere, may already be waiting inside. When you think of a lake house, you imagine peace. You imagine still water reflecting the stars, nights by the fire, and mornings wrapped in quiet. But these stories tear down that illusion, showing how quickly paradise can turn into a prison. A single package on the doorstep can change everything. A forgotten attic can hold more than old furniture. A flashing light across the lake can lure you into the kind of trap you never walk away from unchanged. What connects these three tales is not ghosts or monster sit, is people. People who plan, who deceive, who wait. That is what makes them terrifying. The woman on the frozen lake knew her victim before he even stepped outside. The veteran in the attic lived above a family's childhood memories, poisoning a place that once felt safe. The figure with the projector crafted a perfect illusion, counting on the simple human instinct to help. None of these encounters were accidents. They were deliberate, and that is what makes them linger long after the night is over. The lesson is simple but brutal. Isolation breeds vulnerability. We convince ourselves that distance from others keeps us safe, that a remote house by the water is an escape from the chaos of life. But distance also erases witnesses. Silence swallows cries for help. The same windows that let you admire the lake at sunrise can also serve as a stage for someone watching you from the darkness. So what can we take from this? Be cautious.
They're still out
Trust
there.
your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Do not dismiss the unease that creeps in when you see a gift that does not belong, or hear a noise where there should be none. Question everything. Safety is not guaranteed simply because you locked a door, or because you convinced yourself nothing bad ever happens in quiet places. In fact, it is in those quiet places that predators thrive. And remember, you cannot always fight the danger that comes for you, but you can prepare yourself. Awareness is protection. Knowledge is a weapon. These stories are not just entertainment, they are warnings. The next time you find yourself booking a stay at a cabin or a lake house, ask yourself, do you really know who else might be there? Do you really know who left the light on? If these stories made you shiver, if they made you question the safety of your own walls, then you understand the truth. Horror is not confined to movies or legends. It is real, it is waiting, and it is closer than you think. This is why we tell these stories, this is why we share them. Because one day, the difference between safety and terror could be a single decision, the choice to open a door, to answer a call for help, to ignore that feeling in your gut. So stay alert, stay alive. And if you want more true tales that expose the price of trust, the cost of silence, and the danger of isolation, subscribe now to The Price Paid. Because here, we show you exactly what it means to pay the ultimate price.